Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. My name is Mark and I am 54 years old. Looking back, my life experience seems like a drama, full of ups and downs. I want to share my story with you, a story of betrayal, pain, but ultimately to rebirth. My wife Kathy is 51 years old and we have been married for 24 years. As we approached the 25th anniversary of our marriage, I had been full of anticipation and planned a big party in her honor. However, fate slapped me in the face and completely changed the trajectory of my life. Let me start at the beginning. I am the owner of a bakery that was passed down to me from my father. Although running a bakery is not a job that makes a lot of money, I love the business and enjoy serving delicious bread to my customers. Meanwhile, my wife, Kathy, works for a local accounting firm, and she earns quite a bit more than I do. We have two wonderful children, a 20-year-old son and a 19-year-old daughter. They've moved out to live their own lives and become more and more independent. Kathy and I couldn't be prouder to watch them grow into independent individuals. Our family has always been a source of happiness for me. Despite all the chores and stresses of life, whenever I see my wife and children, a warmth wells up in my heart. Kathy, in particular, is a very outgoing person who always makes the atmosphere around her come alive. Her ability to light up a room and make any party wonderful is one of the reasons I've always loved her so deeply. As our 25th wedding anniversary approaches, my heart is filled with anticipation and excitement. I decided I wanted to design and bake a special cake myself to celebrate this important day. It's not just a cake. It's a unique and personal sentimental touch that I wanted to add to our celebration. However, just as I was busy preparing for my upcoming anniversary, my world completely fell apart overnight. It was the end of a normal month and Kathy was working late at the office as usual because she had to close the books. Usually on days like this, her company arranges transportation for her. But that day, on a whim, I decided to pick her up from work and take her out for a fancy dinner. I wanted to surprise her and show how thoughtful and caring I am as a husband. When I walked into her office, the sight in front of me made me drop like a stone. The office was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a cell phone screen. In that faint light, I saw two figures tightly entwined. As I approached, I saw my beloved wife bent over while a strange man was having sex with her from behind. At that moment, my heart instantly fell into a bottomless abyss. I couldn't believe my eyes and couldn't comprehend what was happening in front of me. I felt a wave of vertigo, as if the whole world was spinning. My mind went blank, and the only thing I could do was to mechanically walk forward until I stood in front of them. I shuddered and called out Kathy's name. She quickly stood up and greeted me as if nothing had happened. I looked at her in shock, unable to believe she could be so calm. She tried to explain that it wasn't what I thought it was, but I couldn't think anymore. All I know is that I witnessed it without any explanation or defense. I turned to the man, who was busy organizing his clothes. I forced myself to stay calm, looked him straight in the eye and asked him what his name was. He grunted vaguely and said his name was Alex. He looked to be in his 30s and a little shorter than me. In that moment, I felt an unspeakable anger and humiliation. I gave Kathy one last look and asked her sarcastically, "Is this the best man you could find?" Then I turned and left the office, leaving them staring at each other in disbelief. As I drove home, it felt like the whole world had changed color. Streets I once knew now seemed so foreign. Memories that were once good are now bitter and hard to bear. I kept asking myself, why? Why me? Why now? But these questions just kept echoing in my head, not getting any answers. When I got home, I opened my usual bottle of wine and sat in the living room waiting for Kathy to return. I needed answers, an explanation, even though I knew that no matter what she said it wouldn't erase what I had seen. Time passed by, and each moment felt like a century. Finally, close to midnight, I heard the sound of a key being inserted into the lock of a door. Kathy is back. The air seemed to freeze as Kathy walked through the door. I gestured for her to sit in the chair across from me, and she hesitated, then eased herself into it. The The silence between us was so heavy it was almost suffocating. I took a deep breath and calmly said, "Kathy, we need to talk?" She nodded, a flicker of unease in her eyes. I continued, "I've installed a camera here, and it's recording right now. I want you to answer my questions honestly." Kathy's expression became a little haughty as she said, "Well, ask your question." I looked her straight in the eye and asked the question that had been tormenting me all evening. "How long have you been betraying me?" Silence. I asked again, a quiver in my voice. Finally, she spoke, 6 months. This answer was like a sharp blade that pierced deep into my heart. For 6 months, 6 whole months, I lived a lie without knowing anything about it. I forced myself to hold back the pain I felt inside and continued to press. Why? Why? Her answer completely turned my perception of her upside down. I was expecting her to say something like she was bored, wanted adventure, or maybe even that I wasn't attractive enough. But what she said was far more than I could have imagined. Kathy said in an arrogant tone I've never seen before, "I'm pretty. I'm beautiful. I deserve this. I'm the star and everyone loves me, so I need to share my love." I couldn't believe my ears. Is this the same Kathy I've known for 24 years? I asked back, "Are you stupid, or do you think I'm stupid enough to believe that kind of nonsense? Who thinks that way?" Then I asked the other question that terrified me. "Have you had sex with other people as well?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Yes." That short answer completely crushed me. I feel like I've become the world's biggest idiot. Not only has my wife cheated on me, but she has been recklessly having relationships with multiple people while I have been working my ass off to keep this family and bakery together. Suddenly, a horrible thought flashed through my mind. I shuddered and asked, "Our child, is it my own?" Kathy looked at me and replied, "Yes, they are your children." Despite what she said, I was still skeptical inside. I told myself that I couldn't abandon them even if the DNA test showed that they weren't my biological children. I've lived with them for so many years that they are my children, regardless of blood. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. "Now that you're caught, what do you want?" I asked. She seemed a little confused. "What do you mean by that?" I said bluntly, "I don't want you in my life anymore. You have to go." Surprisingly, Kathy agreed and said she would leave in the morning. This indifference angered me even more. "After 24 years of marriage, you humiliate me like this." I snarled and proceeded to say something even more vulgar. Kathy looked at me calmly and said something that completely broke me. "You're lucky I married you. When I married you, you were nothing. You are who you are today because of me." I responded with a bitter smile. "Yes, I worked my ass off at that bakery to make everyone's day." Then she said something I never thought I'd hear from her. "After all that effort, you're still a loser." The words were like a sharp knife, piercing deep into my heart. I tried to control myself and not let the primal anger take over. I can't believe that this is the same person I spent 24 years of my life with. I realized that a veil had always existed over her, hiding who she really was, and now that veil had finally been lifted. I sat there with the exact same look on my face. I'm afraid that Will Smith had when he heard Jada Pinkett Smith admit to betraying him. My eyes filled with tears, but I desperately tried to hold them back. That night seemed to last forever. I couldn't sleep except to listen to the sound of Kathy packing upstairs. Every rattle felt like an irony of the life we once shared. When the first rays of dawn hit the room, it was all over. Kathy took her bags and left the home we shared for 24 years. As I watched her back disappear into the doorway, I felt a strong pang of emptiness and loss. That afternoon, I called my kids home. When they arrived, the look on their faces told me they had sensed something was wrong. I took a deep breath and began to explain to them what had happened. "Children," I spoke, my voice shaking a little, "there is something I need to tell you. This may shock and upset you, but I think you have a right to know the truth." I played the video of my conversation with Kathy. While watching the video, my son and daughter's faces were first shocked, then angry, and finally deeply saddened. When the video ended, a heavy silence filled the room. My daughter was the first to break the silence, a sob in her voice. "Daddy, I can't believe Mommy would do this." My son, on the other hand, clenched his fists and said angrily, "How could she do this to you? To us?" I tried to comfort them, even though I needed comforting myself. "I know it's hard to accept," I said, "but we have to be strong. We still have each other." I didn't go to the bakery for the next few days. I told my staff to manage everything for now. I need time to organize my thoughts and adjust to this new reality. However, life didn't give me much of a break. A few days later, Kathy called and asked to meet to discuss our breakup. As much as I resisted it in my heart, I knew it was unavoidable. We met at a neutral cafe. When I saw her, I was surprised to realize that I didn't have that warmth and closeness inside me that I used to have. In its place was a sense of strangeness, as if we had never really known each other. "Mark," she spoke up, a hint of unease in her voice. "We need to discuss the division of property." I looked her straight in the eye and said calmly, "I'm not giving up any of my possessions. The bakery was left to me by my father, and it will remain mine." Surprisingly, Kathy agreed. She said she would not ask for any alimony considering her high income. We came to an agreement that we wouldn't touch our joint property as those would be transferred to our children in the future. And so it was that our marriage came to an end in peace. No big fights, no long legal battles, just a piece of divorce paper and two estranged strangers. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange sense of relief, though still filled with a sense of pain and betrayal inside. I knew that from this moment on, a new page had been turned in my life. I am no longer the cheated husband, but a man who has regained his freedom, a man who has had the opportunity to redefine himself. With these mixed feelings, I drove home, ready to start my new life. Despite the uncertainty of the road ahead, I know that as long as I still have my children and my beloved bakery, I have the courage to face all challenges. For the first few weeks after my divorce, I felt like I was walking in a fog. Every morning I wake up, and it takes me a few seconds to remind myself that Kathy is no longer in my life. I started back to work at the bakery, trying to fill the emptiness inside with busyness. However, living in a small town is not easy. Everyone seems to know what's going on. When I walk down the street or work in a bakery, I can feel the looks of sympathy and curiosity. Some customers would look at me with sad and comforting eyes, which made me uncomfortable. I don't want to be an object of pity. All I want is to start my life over. One day, a regular customer, Mary, came into the store, a kind old lady who often came in to buy whole wheat bread from our store. "Mark, dear," she said softly, "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" I forced a smile and replied, "Thank you for your concern, Mary. I'm trying to adjust to my new life." Mary patted my hand and said, "Remember, the pain will pass. You're a good man, Mark. You will find happiness." Conversations like this play out almost every day. While I appreciated their kindness, every conversation felt like it was ripping open the still healing wound in my heart. To escape these sympathetic glances, I started going to a local bar. The atmosphere there made me feel comfortable. No one looked at me with pity, and I could sit quietly in a corner, alone with my thoughts. It was in this bar that I met Tony. He was an almost 60-year-old man with a thick gray beard and bright blue eyes. We happened to sit next to each other at the bar and started talking about sports and politics. "Hey man," Tony asked me the other night, "I see you around here by yourself a lot. Something on your mind?" Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was because Tony was a stranger and I felt like I could confide in him. I told him about Kathy and how it changed my life completely. Tony listened quietly and then said, "Mark, you know what? Sometimes life gives us a head start in order to wake us up. Maybe this is your chance to start over." His words put me in deep thought. Tony continued, "Why don't you try some new hobbies? Or put your energy into your career?" From that day on, I began to re-examine my life. I realized that I had been giving my full attention to my family and the bakery while neglecting my personal development. I started trying new things. First, I signed up for a local fitness class. At first, I felt exhausted and sore, but over time I began to enjoy the benefits of exercise. Not only have I gotten in better shape, but my mood has become more positive. At the same time, I began to focus on the bakery. I realized that although our bread was popular locally, we had never tried to expand our business. With Tony's advice, I started learning how to use social media to promote my products. The process is not easy. I, a 50-something-year-old man, have to learn to use platforms like Instagram and Facebook. My kids couldn't help but laugh out loud at the sight of me awkwardly fiddling with my smartphone. "Daddy, do you need help?" my daughter asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. I pretended to be angry and said, "Hey, don't underestimate your dad. I'm capable of learning new skills." And so, with the help of my kids, I'm slowly getting the hang of social media marketing. I started sharing our bread making process online, featuring different types of bread, and even started live streaming our baking process. Amazingly, our online fan base is starting to grow rapidly. People love our real, down-to-earth style and our love of bread. Soon we started receiving orders from other cities. My son saw the opportunity and offered to join the company. "Dad," he said excitedly, "we can take care of the logistics and marketing. I'm sure we can get bread to more places." And so began the transformation of our little bakery. We have invested in new equipment and expanded our production. My son is in charge of logistics and marketing, while I focus on ensuring the quality of the bread and developing new varieties. Over time, our business has expanded, from the initial local delivery to neighboring cities to statewide. Within a few short months, we've been able to deliver our bread to 14 different states. My income has increased dramatically. From barely making ends meet, their income has increased sevenfold. This success gave me great satisfaction and self-confidence. One day, as I stood in the newly expanded bakery, looking at the busy staff and smelling the aroma of fresh bread, I suddenly realized that I was no longer the same Mark whose heart was broken by betrayal. I became a successful entrepreneur, someone who was able to control my own destiny. To celebrate all this, I bought a new convertible. As I drove around town in this shiny car, I felt more freedom and joy than I had ever felt before. Sometimes I even race my car through the streets at night, feeling the thrill of the wind blowing through my hair. The change was not only on the outside, but I became stronger and more confident on the inside. I began to re-examine my values and stopped basing my self-worth on the judgment of others. However, fate always seems to like surprises. Just when I thought everything was looking up, I happened to run into Kathy on the street. I was driving around town that afternoon in my new convertible, enjoying a rare moment of leisure. Suddenly, I saw a familiar figure standing in front of a roadside cafe. "It's Kathy." My first reaction was to speed away, but what drove me to stop? Maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's trying to prove something to yourself. I parked my car and walked toward her. Kathy obviously noticed me too. There was a flash of surprise in her eyes, then an awe that was hard to hide. I knew what she was looking at: my new car, my new look, and the aura of confidence I exuded throughout. "Mark," she called tentatively, "you look different." I smiled and replied, "Yes, a lot has changed." Kathy's eyes scanned back and forth over me and finally landed on my car. "Is that your new car?" she asked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. I nodded, "Yes, I bought it recently. Business was good, so I treated myself." We stood there in an awkward silence. I've noticed that Kathy doesn't look as radiant as she once did. She had noticeable dark circles under her eyes and a few extra wrinkles on her face. Maybe it's because I no longer look at her through the filter of love that I notice these details. Kathy broke the silence. "Mark, can we sit down and have a cup of coffee? I'd like to talk to you." I struggled internally. Part of me wanted to say no right away, but another part of me felt that maybe this was a chance to let go of the past once and for all. "Okay," I said, "but only for a few minutes." We found an outdoor table and sat down. Kathy began to ramble on about her experiences during this time, but I found myself not caring as much as I expected. My attention was focused more on the way she spoke, the smug tone, the attitude that the world should revolve around her. I suddenly realized that these qualities had always been there. I had just been too blinded by love to notice them before. When Kathy finally stopped to catch her breath, I spoke up, "If you're done, I think I should go." She looked a little surprised. "Mark, you've changed so much. How did you do it?" I calmly replied, "I removed the poison from my life." That comment made Kathy wince, but I didn't care. I stood up, ready to leave. Just then, Kathy suddenly grabbed my hand. "Mark, wait. I made a big mistake." I realize now what I've lost. Can we just start over? I looked at her, and a sudden calmness came over me. I realized that at this moment I am a completely different man than the heartbroken man I was a few months ago. I gently drew my hand back. Kathy, I said, you're right. You did lose something. But that doesn't matter anymore. I'm doing well, better than I ever have. I don't need to start over because I've already started a new life. I saw a flicker of remorse and loss in Kathy's eyes, but I could no longer move for her feelings. I continued. I should be thanking you. If it wasn't for your betrayal, I might never have realized my potential. I could have been living an ordinary life, never knowing what I could have become. Kathy seemed shocked by my words. She opened her mouth to say something, but I shook my head gently. Bye, Kathy. I wish you all the best for the future. With that, I turned away and walked to my car. As I started the engine, I could see in the rearview mirror that Kathy was still standing there, watching me leave. But this time, there were no waves in my mind. I have completely let go of the past and am ready for a brand new future. Over the next few days, I continue to focus on growing my business and personal life. I started dating a local model. She's much younger than me, which makes me a little uneasy, but she always says age is just a number. I know the relationship may not last, but I've decided to cherish the moment and enjoy the time. I started sharing our photos on social media, not to show off or to get revenge, but because I really felt happy. I realized that Kathy may see these photos, but it doesn't matter anymore. With a successful career and a rich personal life, I began to think about the future. I made a will and divided all my property equally among my children. I told them that I was proud of them and wanted them to continue the family business, but also respected their personal choices. Daddy, my daughter said to me one day, you look happier than you ever have. I hugged her and lamented, because I finally found my true self. I'm starting to plan my retirement for next year. While I love my bakery, I felt it was time to shift my focus to my personal life. I bought a cabin in the woods and planned to spend my later years there. One day, as I stood on the balcony of my cabin overlooking the lush forest, I felt a peace I had never known before. I'm reminded of this amazing journey through life, from a betrayed husband to a successful entrepreneur, and now to this person who has found inner peace. I realize that every twist and turn in life, good or bad, has shaped me into the person I am today. Kathy's betrayal had broken my heart, but it had also been the catalyst for my rebirth. Without that painful experience, I may never have realized my potential and never have experienced such freedom and joy. As the sun set, coloring the forest gold, I took a deep breath and felt the fresh air fill my lungs. I smiled and thought that life is indeed full of surprises, but it's those surprises that make life so wonderful. I don't know what else awaits me in the future, but I do know that no matter what happens, I am capable of facing it in customer service. Because I've learned the most important lesson of all, true happiness comes from within, not dependent on others. And so it is that I, Mark, at age 54, stand at a new beginning in my life, welcoming each new sunrise and looking forward to each unknown tomorrow. My story isn't over, it's just beginning. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.